is announcements. I'd like to remind you all once again, I will be doing it weekly. You'll likely be tired of hearing about it until the event, but OpenSearchCon 23 is coming. We don't have a date yet, but this is a reminder for your future reminders that there is a reminder for a countdown coming. So make sure to be reminded that OpenSearchCon 23 is coming. Oh, and happy Pi Day. That's right. It's 3/14 today. Here's a little picture of a pie with pi on it.
Jazz hands.
Jazz hands, rock and roll, man. So we have Joshua Bright and the SQL team joining us today to talk about our Apache Spark object stores. We talked about this shortly a little bit last week or the week before, I think. But here's they're here to talk about the progress they've made there. I've advised them to take all the time that they want with their presentation. They are the only presenters we have today. So today might be a little bit of Robin Hood and Little John talking about this and that, about what the other end has to say. No Disney Robin Hood fans there? All right, fine. That might be a little too old for some of you.
No, I was a huge fan.
Oh, okay.
So I was dancing. You couldn't
the
see me
fox
off
and
screen.
the lion for the king and the snake and
yeah. No, that was solid.
the trope good versus evil. All right, rad.
Good.
Joshua or whoever's presenting with Joshua, feel free to share your screen, take over, and let's see what's happening.
What the team is exploring, I think, is an opportunity for us to really index on the open part of OpenSearch. And what that means is, how can we expand outside of data sources that are just within OpenSearch? So I think you're seeing progress as it pertains to our Prometheus connector. And now we want to build on that kind of momentum, and we want to afford the ability to go out and reach data where it rests in an object store near you. So in order to do that, though, OpenSearch natively, as you all may know, doesn't have the compute required to do those types of activities where you're joining data outside of OpenSearch proper. So what the team is doing is exploring a Spark integration where we would utilize Spark as a compute engine, which will help us be able to connect data in a complex way. So not just kind of your standard ability to go and access data from an object store or other external sources, but be able to do complex joining and faceting across data. So where we're at right now is we have established the plumbing, which will show how OpenSearch is connecting out to object stores. In a future segment, we'll talk about how we plan to use OpenSearch for indexing. So that, not only have we established the plumbing, but now we're looking to improve the query performance by utilizing what we all know is a really great indexing engine that is OpenSearch. So with that being said, Pratik, are we ready to do an awesome demo?
Big.
Yeah. So yeah, hi everyone. A small introduction from my side. I am Pratik from the OpenSearch SQL team. We have been working on this new project for OpenSearch and Spark integration. Can feel free to look at this issue 116, and then go into more details here, we request you to add more comments and go to the design in detail. So before I dive into the demo, let me give you a small introduction about this. So we are working on this new feature where we use the Spark integration with OpenSearch to leverage more compute power and also to connect to external object stores or other data stores. And this would give us mainly two things as part of the challenges that we are trying to solve. One is better aggregation framework, and the second is to have some missing features that were not part of OpenSearch now coming from Spark. For example, join and subquery. Here's the high-level architecture where a user will come into OpenSearch dashboards, use the SQL from OpenSearch, and then connect to Spark via JDBC. And using the OpenSearch Spark connector, we can write and read to a materialized view and accelerate our queries in Spark. Now coming to today's demo, I'll just give you a sneak peek of our initial connection with Spark, where we have a direct SQL query made to Spark Thrift server and use the result in OpenSearch dashboards to create visualization. So yeah, let's dive into the demo. Here I have my access logs stored as JSON files in S3 with gzip compression. I go ahead and add a data source for my Spark JDBC connection. I give it a name, my Spark, add the connector JDBC, add my thrift URL, and you can go ahead and even add your username and password in the properties section. And then I assign roles. What roles can be performed with this data source? Now here in this line, I go ahead and then create a table with access logs, its respective fields that I want to be using in my queries. Use the JSON object as all my files are stored as JSON, and give the S3 part to it. Finally, I use the gzip compression to uncompress these files and store it in the table. I've already created it. So let's go ahead and hit a query to just get the count of all the access logs that are stored in my S3 bucket. So as you can see in the result, I have the initial count that is 70K logs that are stored in my access logs folder. Now let's go ahead and see how the observability engine processes it. So I can go ahead and write a query, select star from access logs, and maybe limit it to 100. And this gives me all the logs that were stored in S3 and limiting it to top 100. And we can see all the fields similar to how you would see from an OpenSearch index. Now let's go ahead and maybe add a query. So here I have a PPL query that counts the number of requests for status 404 and 200. Once I hit refresh, I get the count that is grouped by status. And if I go to visualizations, I can even create a visualization from this data that I received from Spark. Click on update. Yeah, here you have two graphs. Most of the requests are fortunately 200, and we still have some 404s here. Now we can also use it for different type of group by aggregations where you have multiple dimensions. So for example, this query counts the total number of requests and groups them by protocol and method. So in the visualization, we have two dimensions. And as you can see, we have the different count for get and post requests by the protocol that was used to make those requests. The other visualization that I have here is to get the average size of access log that is grouped by per hour and sorted per hour. So I get the number of the size of the requests that were made and throughout the day. And we can see here at 4 o'clock, there were maximum number of requests made. So it may be easy to assume that a lot of users are logging in during that time. And finally, I have a query where I'm using I'm counting the total number of requests and grouping them by R. So I get a total aggregation view of how many requests were made for each R throughout our time span. And this is easy to find anomalies. For example, here we see a surge in the request, which may be actually be caused by some internal errors or something like a DDoS attack where you have a lot of requests coming in. So it's this way it's easier to perform writing Spark SQLs and using the compute power from Spark to OpenSearch and using OpenSearch dashboards to create create different queries and visualize them in observability plugin. Now, as a popular request, users wanted to use the OpenSearch SQL and OpenSearch PPL visualizations in dashboards. So we are working on that actively as well. Soon in the coming releases, you will see a new option in visualizations tab where you can add SQL and PPL visualizations and move it to your dashboards that are pre-created. So let me give you a small demo of that here. We have a pre-created sample dashboard. If I click on edit and add, I have a new type of visualization SQL and PPL. If I click on this visualization and scroll down, here we see the visualization that we created from PPL is already here in dashboards. So this is how you can have an end-to-end framework where you have object store data stored in S3. You use the SQL and Spark integration to fetch your data and analyze your data in OpenSearch, and then leverage OpenSearch dashboards observability plugin to create such insightful visualizations. And then finally move those visualizations to your existing dashboards and have different data sources being accumulated in a single dashboard. So that's what I had for this end-to-end demo. Moving on to questions.
Yeah, I'm a little curious about the nature of persistence between the two. So we've got an SQL server, this Thrift server. When those the visualizations by default, those are read from the local indices, but these SQL connections, are those grabbed and then indexed locally, or is it constantly having to talk to the Thrift server to update the data?
Yeah, currently in my current demo, how it does is we fetch it from the Spark SQL JDBC Thrift server connection. So everything is fetched from Spark. We do not store locally, but moving forward, we'll have materialized views where we have a secondary index stored in OpenSearch, or even a separate feature called covering index, where we'll allow moving data from Spark or the object store to an OpenSearch index.
Awesome. Cool, and thanks for sharing that with us. That's really cool to see, and I can I really like the idea of going after data where it sits, and that's great. You know, in the future, I'd love to see where this goes and see what other kinds of data that we can integrate and aggregate. I'll open the floor. Anyone else have any questions?
Yeah, I think that's actually a nice tee up. I think the team will continue to provide progress that we're making. We think this is a really great way to bring the community along. And as we add additional fidelity to the presentation, we hope that this sparks, no pun intended, a few ideas in your heads within the community about what kind of use cases do you see that this will help unlock, because we always want to make sure that we're working backwards from really solid use cases that y'all are experiencing.
Well, I'm curious. Sorry, I keep speaking up. Does anyone else have any questions first?
I have a question. Yeah. So when we write a SQL query, which is eventually going to use the Spark engine and finally fetch data from S3, and Spark me being an in-memory engine, so are the resources in terms of memory and vCPU, are my data nodes going to be utilized for this in OpenSearch, or is it going to be resources completely separate from my OpenSearch cluster?
So as of now, we are expecting that users will bring their own Spark clusters and attach their thrift server using the data sources API. So every compute that runs aggregation and all the other stuff will be pushed down to your Spark cluster.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we still able to perform search on the data that you're connected to via Apache Spark with the same efficiency that we do, locally stored indices?
Yeah, it should be more or less the same, because all those functions will now use the Spark cluster's compute power. So it will be even better or faster to work on large amount of data. The only thing there is, how would we use the materialized views or a secondary index in OpenSearch to accelerate all those queries? For more details on that, you can go and look at the materialized view issue here. So that explains a lot of details and our approach on how do we attack those problems.
Yeah. So one follow-up question to the same one. So if the resources of my Spark cluster is utilized here, can I assume here OpenSearch is more doing like a client node activity where I submit a Spark job and just get the results to display in a visualization? Would that be a right assumption here?
Sorry, someone.
No. What I'm trying to ask here is like, if
I can.
OpenSearch,
I can answer that. So here in the current demo, what we saw was just a push down. There was no acceleration. But you will see in the later demos that we show that we are trying to use a secondary index, which will store some of your index data from the S3 object, and that will be utilized for acceleration of your queries. So we won't be storing all the data here, but only the data that needs to be indexed, and that would be used by the user for analyzing your data or aggregation quite frequently. So that will actually boost your Spark query. And the boosting and optimization of those queries will be in your Spark cluster. So we'll provide some jars that you will add to your Spark cluster, and you can leverage all those optimizations that we bring in with the secondary index. So it won't be just a push down where we just give everything to Spark and Spark does it all, but we'll have an optimization framework where we try to use the OpenSearch secondary index and then optimize your Spark queries.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Hi, this is Amitai. I have a quick question. I don't know if I may have missed it earlier, but I'm saying it's kind of like a proxying, we're proxying access to Spark here, and of course, there's a lot of amazing benefits here. I want to understand. There's probably some compute involved also on the OpenSearch side. Is this going to be managed in a specific node type, or is it happening kind of at the coordinating or client node, so to speak? Like whatever's listed in this orange box here, OpenSearch, is this where does that occur?
So let me take that question. Thanks, Amitai, for the question. There's one summarization point that I'll add before I answer the direct question you have. So Everybody's familiar with generic SQL databases, assuming MySQL, Postgres, or anything else. Drawing a parallel, ideally, you just create a table in a database and start accessing the data. Similarly, you dump objects in an object store and start accessing the object store. When you come to the table analogy, what happens is the more data set you try to access from the table, you have filters, aggregations, and you realize soon that you're doing a full table scan and your query starts slowing down. Then you start creating indices. And depending on the size of your data set, you index everything. You create a secondary index with a covered strategy or a skipping strategy, or you create materialized views for smaller specific views, which can be accelerated. And these are all strategies well versed within the SQL domain. In the data lake space, if you're considering object stores as a database in the data lake world, you don't have these strategies very predominantly used. They are available. And this is what we're trying to enable, is enable OpenSearch as a secondary indexing and acceleration engine for the data lake. Almost most of the work for this project is happening in Spark. Most of it is under query planners and optimizers in Catalyst. The OpenSearch resources are not used for compute. So to directly answer your question, OpenSearch resources are not used for SQL query optimization and SQL query compute. All of that is Spark compute power. OpenSearch is used for retrieving secondary index data, and OpenSearch is used for its own capabilities of aggregations, high cardinality queries, and full text search. Hope that answers your question. Let me know if you have a follow-up.
Thanks. A follow-up for cardinality, for example. So cardinality is like one of those things that is, it can be a cluster killer. Like if I ask, what is the unique, count of some something with a huge distribution that's going to kill the cluster. If it's calculated during stream time, then it's actually very fast. This is where like Spark would probably be better, like far better. Than OpenSearch. So why would we, wouldn't it be better to leave that kind of query power to Spark rather than OpenSearch?
You choose the best configuration for your use cases. There are degenerate use cases like medians and other cases where it is really worse. There are more simplistic use cases if you have trace IDs and logs built in together, or other correlation data built in together, which can be easily leveraged. Pick your poison, but there is no magic over here. OpenSearch is something that is powerful at full text search and some high cardinality use cases. Statistically, medians and other things are degenerate and will always be expensive no matter which platform we use. The goal of the project is to use secondary indexing capabilities of OpenSearch, but not leverage OpenSearch for new compute. OpenSearch will do existing what it has been doing until now.
Thanks.
We're open to see how you want to take the framework and moving ahead, because Spark is a huge ecosystem. You have access to UDFs. You can do threat hunting. You can actually index some UDF specific data set, which can make your UDFs go faster. You have machine learning libraries. You can do sentiment analytics on search. It's such an open use case right now. Once the framework is in there, you can do so much. And especially with Hive Metastore, you can connect into other lake systems. We have a Delta Lake compatible format, which we'll talk in future presentations. And Peng is the lead engineer on this project. He's also in the call. So we can talk more about the future of the project in few coming talks.
All right, thanks. The other tab of Chime over there. So I'm, that's great. Of course, I'm from Logz.io, so we're mostly looking into actually observability data. So in terms of Spark, it's kind of like a strange thing to be viewing, but there are of course always implementations which use AI.
I think one of the interesting use cases is if you want to do log analytics at petabytes and exabytes, OpenSearch doesn't scale. Even like terabytes OpenSearch doesn't scale. There are limits. And how do you use these strategies to bring in more compute? Especially a language like PPL. We showed this entire demo in SQL. My question would be, do you think PPL is valuable in Spark? Should we bring PPL language to Spark as a compute? Would that ease user interactions or log discovery and log investigations? Let us know your use cases in this regard.
Well, definitely yes for the PPL. Yeah.
Awesome. We are actually also in line working with the Jaeger community and Jonah to figure out how we can get more trace analytic compute and trace overviews and trace red metrics from large data sets in S3 on OpenSearch without them being stored in OpenSearch.
Okay. Yeah, Jonah from Ivan. Cool. Is he on the call, by the way? No.
No, I would just say Jonah from Jaeger.
Oh, okay, I see. Okay, and last question was regarding security and stuff. Unless I don't know if we have time, but in terms of security, like role-based access, things like this, is it on the roadmap? Because if I'm accessing,
Spark,
how do I differentiate?
Spark connections are managed by RBAC. All external data sources connections are managed by RBAC. Authentication and role-based access to a data source is managed by RBAC. Now, within the data source, we leave it to the data source's authorization mechanism of choice. So if you're connecting to Prometheus, certain roles in OpenSearch can gain access to the Prometheus cluster. If you're connecting to Spark, you can have 4 Spark clusters and certain roles can have access to different Spark clusters. Now, within Spark authorization, you pick Ranger or you do whatever you are comfortable doing. And if you need further fine-grained access control, I think we can do it. I don't have a use case for it.
If we're storing, if I were to store, if someone's sending me logs and I store them as a gzip in S3 and I just put Spark over that, would that kind of work in this exact configuration? They saw gzip before.
Yeah, that's the demo that Pratik showed. That's the exact demo that Pratik showed right now. Okay,
that's pretty awesome. And then the interesting part that for me is always the problem, like so when we put things in OpenSearch, right? A lot of times we'll use data prepper or something, we'll kind of expand field. And also sometimes we'll decide, let's say, some of the data, like we'll modify it in some way, and then it's a bit different. For example, like the example is, let's say, just the way the mappings work, you know? They're a bit different than what would be in S3 at that point. So I'm just, it's nothing that we could plan for at the moment, but I'm curious, maybe in the future we'll have some interesting conflicting data structures.
I didn't quite understand your question. Could you rephrase?
So sometimes, so OpenSearch is going to assume different mappings, right? And since there's dynamic mapping, however, in S3 it might just be a string, and it won't assume any mapping. It's just going to be some value, and it won't assume anything about it. Whereas in OpenSearch it does have like a mapping.
So let me answer the question. Yeah, that makes sense. So OpenSearch indices are governed and controlled by the Hive metastore in Spark. Hive metastore will orchestrate index creation in OpenSearch and orchestrate all data operations as metadata layer goes in OpenSearch. There is a direct mapping connection from SQL land into OpenSearch indices. That's part of the SQL project, and the same mappings will be structured. Now, the most important part of your question is unstructured data, which is nested fields or JSON fields, and those will be governed by unstructured document processing, similar to JSON processing in MySQL or Particle, which is a spec on that land.
I see. All right, thanks.
So here's something that's always kind of confused me. I probably haven't read enough, but we've got, like you said, this data was gzipped data on an S3 bucket. Is that, I understood that right? So how does OpenSearch know how to process that gzip data? Is it expecting specifically formatted stuff, or how does Spark rather? It just knows how to unzip those and pull the data out, or has it been placed there ahead of time in a specific format?
Cool.
You'll have to
Show your
pardon
demo.
my ignorance there.
Yeah. Pratik, can you show your demo where you create
Yeah.
SQL queries?
So here, the DDL command, whenever you create a table in Spark, you can mention the compression that you used to store your data, and during the table creation, and whenever Spark reads this data, it will uncompress the gzip files using the format that you mentioned and the object that you mentioned. So it will use these two things and then
Oh, I see.
run your
Using
query.
JSON, and then
Yeah.
the storage path is the S3 bucket.
Yeah. And everything, all of this is inbuilt in Spark SQL. So you can just
Okay.
use it by default.
Okay, this is I must have glossed over this. So you are specifically defining your fields, that
Yeah.
in the way that you would expect an SQL
Yeah.
database to work. Okay, thank you for that.
There'll be a pretty awesome UI to do this eventually, where you can browse your data in a data lake and create all of these things without knowing SQL.
Hey, so I have one question. I'm not sure if I just missed it or if maybe it was not covered. It seemed like you weren't using the time frame field from dashboards.
Yeah.
So are there plans to integrate that in the future, or?
100% nice catch. I was
Cool.
hoping somebody would catch it today.
I'm
Demo.
a
It's a demo.
stickler for these. Yeah. That I had a feeling, and I mean, to that point, actually, I'd like to see some nicer like language support. Like rather than doing query and then this just big string blob. I don't know what that UX looks like, but it'd be cool if we could get like auto completion for that or something like that. I know that's no simple task, but yeah,
So,
I'm super excited about this.
Yeah, we have autocomplete for PPL, but you're right. I think we have Prometheus PromQL as a language. We were thinking about like getting PromLens as a UI builder in there, getting a proper SQL UI builder in there. As more and more languages and frameworks come in, that is on the roadmap for this year.
Yeah,
It is happening this year.
cool.
Oh, that'll
That's
be awesome. Yeah, I would love to
Yeah.
see next to the dev console where you kind of practice your API calls as a
Yes.
SQL builder or PPL builder where you
Oh,
kind of
I was just talking to Kevin, and Kevin had a brilliant idea. He was like, why is the dev console and the query tools like in a separate left-hand side hidden menu? He's like, I want to use it everywhere, every time to test out a query. So why not just keep it as a status bar below or somewhere handy? So it just flies out, you test your stuff and do work immediately on top of everything that you're doing.
Oh, see, that would be cool. Kind of like the dev console window on your browser. You just kind of slide out a bunch of
Yes.
tools and
Yes,
tweak and tweak and tweak.
Exactly.
Ooh,
That is the plan for that. So we have a very, very important person joining, which is an intern coming soon. So we're like really hoping he gets us out the door.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, looking forward to that. You'll have to come back and tell us all about that. I'm looking forward to seeing that.
I'm excited for that. I always like those features.
Also,
Yeah,
if anybody from the
Chef's kiss
community
features.
thinks that that's interesting and would like to kind of partner up with us on that, that would be great.
I have a question in terms of creating a secondary index after reading the data from S3, right? Like you said, there is going to be a feature where you got to store the data read from S3 in a secondary index inside OpenSearch, right? So if that is stored as an index or like a view, how frequently that data is going to be refreshed and synced with the S3 data?
Very good question. There are multiple strategies at play over here. First, it will use Spark streaming, and you can define Spark streaming strategies and windowing. Second, you don't need to index everything. You may only need to index offsets and some Bloom filters and some indices separately, which may also be indexed directly from an ingestion stream. So at ingestion stream, this will go into hotel exporters, Fluent D data prepper. So without even touching S3 data, we will get this metadata from ingestion streams. So there are various strategies at play over here, and these are certain mechanisms on which how we can make these refreshes happen. The refreshes can also come from a notification or a ticketing system. If you have a ticket, you never index anything, but when you have a ticket, you index 5 minutes of data plus and minus the event. That may be one strategy. So SNS queues or notification-based indexing will also come in.
Yeah, thank you. So the refresh is going to happen more in terms of streaming. Once the batch data has been captured, refresh will be happening using streaming.
Pick your option: streaming, interrupt-driven, or rule-based. There's no one size fits all, because when you come to data sets which are in petabytes, you cannot index everything. It's just not possible. It's too much data.
Yeah.
Especially when you move to exabytes, the entire game changes.
Yeah.
Praveen, does any one use case kind of fit what you're looking at within your environment?
No, it's not about the use case. I was looking more about the internals, because like I have been working more with Redshift, creating materialized views, and we have a mechanism to refresh the views. So I was thinking, how does that gonna work in OpenSearch for refreshing the views? Like I don't have a use case, but just more comparing and thinking how about the internals. That's it.
Yeah, great.
Great. What do you feel about the current workflows that we mentioned?
Yeah. So what I've been thinking, like after hearing the integration, is that here OpenSearch is more acting like a gateway or a client node, submitting a Spark job, getting the result, displayed as a visualization. So if the feature of the storing secondary index inside OpenSearch is not there, then it looks more like a client way or a
Yeah.
gateway node submitting a job. But if I have this data indexed into OpenSearch, and if that data is being frequently read or frequently visualized, then that's going to be a use case inside OpenSearch.
Yeah, that is right. And I think that's the core goal of this project, to have the secondary indices, because without the secondary indices, it's very difficult to use that volume of data in an object store. That is really what brings the visualizations to life and the investigative use cases to life.
Exactly. And additional point is that if I'm not having and storing this data in OpenSearch, then this looks more like a notebook where I can just render a
Exactly.
Spark
Yeah.
SQL and render visualizations using any code, right? So
Yeah.
that indexing makes a difference. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. And one of the key terms in the project is near real-time analytics on data lake data using OpenSearch. So the acceleration is going to be a super important part over here. And we'll start sharing numbers and performance data in upcoming weeks.
Yeah. And this would also be pretty useful when I'm able to get the secondary index data be looked up for my OpenSearch uh, original index data. Maybe some sort of that kind, where I can use the secondary index as a lookup or something for my original data and retrieve more information on for my original data.
What is the use case for that?
No, I don't I couldn't think about a use case, but what I'm thinking is like, if
Okay.
the secondary data can be used as a metadata, or more giving more information from my original data as a lookup, then that's going to be also be useful. Just throwing out what I had in my mind.
Is that kind of like the idea about traces? In that you've got, core metric or log data that's, hot within OpenSearch, and then you want to view a trace, which is fairly expensive payload with it, and that trace could potentially be in an object store or stored somewhere else.
Okay, I couldn't compare with that, but what ran to my mind is that, say for example, I have my original documents in OpenSearch nodes, but I need some metadata which is sitting back in my S3, and if I want that data to also be combined with my original document, like for now, I should also index the original S3 document, S3 data into OpenSearch. But with this feature, what I can think about here is, okay, I can just directly query from my S3 data and then put it in my secondary index and then make it useful as a useful lookup or an additional information from my original data, which I was actually looking to integrate in the first place. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep.
That makes sense. Thanks, Praveen.
So here's a use case that might be cool. This idea of connecting OpenSearch through, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, proxy or thrift server, can that kind of idea be expanded to connect to arbitrary databases like, MySQL, PostgreSQL, and then all of this same, all these other databases? We could just kind of borrow data from any arbitrary spot at rest.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for adding that. It's JDBC. We can connect anything and everything in the world now. We just need use cases, priorities, GitHub issues, and thumbs up.
Well, I know our forum database is Postgres. I would love to index the forums straight from the SQL data source.
Yep.
Right now, I think we use webhooks or something like that to kind of keep track of unique activities.
Those are possible. We'd have to build support for each and every JDBC connection. JDBC is a protocol. I think it has an implementation with a client driver. So we'll just need like GitHub issues and +1s on there to prioritize some of the work for databases.
Good stuff. Any other questions for the good of the order on this one? Well, that's even better. It's like you get a steak from the chef, and if you don't need steak sauce, that means it's a good steak, So we are almost at time. I wanted to thank the presenters today because I was a little worried we wouldn't be able to fill up the time, and this actually turned out to be a very good conversation starter. So I appreciate that. I'm anxious to see how this turns out. Did we get the issues pasted in there for everyone to keep track of on there? Yeah, it looks like you got them. Wonderful. I think that's all of our official content for today. Does anyone want to fill up some of our time with anything for the good of the order? David Tippett.
Actually,
how was DevRelCon?
I wanted to hop on camera. Yeah, DevRelCon was great. And actually, I wanted to throw a line out there, just because we had a lot of really great talks with people in Japan, and I'm curious to know if anyone has either customers, clients in Japan that are using OpenSearch. Please direct them my way. I'm working on, at least starting a journey towards internationalization for our documentation, at least. And if I could talk to people, their use cases, I know that I was very much convinced that, for OpenSearch to kind of gain good adoption in Japan, we really need to have better internationalized docs. So
well, there are a few questions in the forum about changing the interface language, and there was some trouble finding that too. So I think there might even be work in that arena that we could do to internationalize. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, it's all good. I totally agree. So like as a first step, probably we would want to look towards internationalizing documentation, then potentially the interface as well for OpenSearch. So and even outside of Japan, if you have other people that are looking for internationalized OpenSearch dashboards, reach out to me. You can find me on
Even if you have language skills that might help us reach out to people too. I know we might be short people with multilingual people in that area.
Yeah, exactly. I've just dropped my email in the chat. So that was a big one. Actually, there's already a surprising number of people using OpenSearch in Japan, which is really cool. Got to meet with a couple of the AWS user groups and stuff like that. So yeah, it was phenomenal, and looking forward to sharing some more about that as we have more to share.
Did you buy me a present from Japan?
I did not, unless you want my
What?
towel. I know. I have a
No,
really
that's
cool
quite all
towel.
right. No,
Yeah,
no,
but I did get this wicked cup. Japan.
nice.
It's got Fuji and cherry blossoms and all the wonderful stuff. I know we're big in Japan, Josh. For those who don't know, we have a Twitter statistic that says basically 30% of the tweets about OpenSearch are actually in Japanese. So, fun fact of the day. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone buy those Duolingo accounts.
Yeah. Honestly. Cool.
All right, everyone. I guess if there's nothing else to talk about, I will hang out for 10 more minutes. Feel free to drop. We'll keep recording just in case good stuff comes up. Otherwise, this will be 5-6 minutes of open office hours. Talk about anything you want, except for politics.
Yeah, probably OpenSearch related.
Yeah, preferably OpenSearch related.
Yeah, thanks all. Actually, someone recently on the forums, speaking of internationalization and documentation, was asking about can we have OpenSearch documentation bundled into dashboards, which I thought was a pretty interesting idea.
We should. It should
we
come.
should totally do that. We should totally do
Yeah,
that.
it
I
should
know,
be self-documenting. Absolutely.
It's
Actually,
hard though.
No. So can you share a screen? I want to show you something on Playground. We have that. We did that in like a small section to like try it out. And it is really, really, really nice. I've been trying to
show
get
us.
this into our actual product.
Yeah.
So this is one of the important things that you need to have to make sure new users or users who need a reference can like quickly jump on. So go to Playground, go into the observability plugin. And if you look at PPL, our first thing was, this is a new language, who knows? And how do we teach people? So we started adding like, and Pratik over here, Pratik had the idea and he's like, let's just put this in a panel and put this as a flyout. So go to the observability plugin as a breadcrumb.
There we go.
There you are. Now on the query bar, you see the link called PPL?
Yeah.
Yes, click on that link.
Wow.
And now scroll up and click on the combo box.
Yeah.
And here, pick a command you like. And I think we should do this for every single thing. Just have a flyout or something like a drawer coming in and teaching you commands.
Okay. So I'm gonna ask a potentially maybe silly or controversial question is, how do we keep this in parity with our actual documentation pages? Like that is going to be a challenge, because that was my first thought. It's like, oh, we could just, bundle the Jekyll up as maybe like static files and then deploy it with the with the version. But I like this much better. The UX is much better.
So this is actually coming from our unit tests and our build systems.
Okay.
And our build systems generate this documentation automatically, but they could also very well scrape off documentation from our website and format it over here as part of the build. So as part of the build of the version, we can ship a static version-based documentation and have a link out to the documentation website, or if somebody's connected to the internet, we can pull in the live docs.
Yeah, that's
with the right Jekyll templating, we could probably export every single piece of documentation they need as a JSON file. I don't know how to set the content or the content type in Jekyll via front matter, but that would be neat.
It would be a challenge also, like getting all of that into here, but it's definitely something worth pursuing. So I love this. Let's do more. Let's do it all. But
there are actually a couple of very nice projects who do like compressed sort of client-side databases or JSON or JavaScript style databases. including search on documentations, because if you do documentation and don't do search, it's pretty much useless.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean,
This is one of
really,
the projects that
our-
would be really, really nice to have and awesome for the project.
even
Yeah,
if it's
cool.
just a subset for these PPL references or any place you need any kind of syntax reference, would be helpful. And that, that way you could always make sure that you're looking at the proper version of the documentation as well, if it was bundled with the product.
Yeah, I think this reminds me of, like, I really want, like, you remember Clippy from Microsoft? Like, we want a mascot where, like, the Clippy appears everywhere, wherever there is help, you ask it a question, or have a symbol for every single thing that could just link into the correct place for docs to learn more.
Yeah.
It looks like you're trying to write a PPL query. How can Clippy help you?
Oh my gosh. Well, and the funny thing is, you just mentioned it's kind of useless without search, but that's the wonderful thing about it being built into OpenSearch. Like, we could literally just store an index of this documentation.
Exactly. Yes.
Additionally,
That
if
could
you're-
even, it might be neat to see that as one of the sample data buttons, the flight index, web documents.
Totally cool.
Here's
Yeah,
our
we can
current
do that.
documentation. How would you like to set up a search for it?
Yeah. And that could be like documentation across all versions.
That would rock.
All right,
That's hot.
so which of us is gonna go and open the feature request for this?
1, 2, 3,
I'm
not
dead. Yeah, right. But seriously, needs to happen.
No, seriously. I think we need to add it in. So can I actually request, Pratik, since you created the initial feature and we've been working on the next version of this for a generation right now. It's been going on for a year and it's been like pushing back on priorities. Let's just add an issue and we go from there.
Yeah, just put it out there. And honestly, one of the things I want to do more is I'm trying to get more people to vote on issues. I feel like that's a nice mechanism for us to see, like, oh, hey, maybe I don't have something to say about this. Like, I just like the idea. So just drop thumbs. For those watching on YouTube after the fact, you'll find the issue and drop a thumb on it if you want to see this more. I certainly will.
It is a very nice way to kind of ensure a lazy consensus. We don't need a novel as to why you like it, although it helps. But
unless you have use case, that is handy as well.
Unless is required, but thumbs up
for sure.
Hey, I like this. It's like I don't know much about art, but I know what I like.
Exactly.
Additionally,
so glad I brought that up.
Go
ahead.
Sorry. Additionally, if you're able to add some say natural language capabilities to the documentation in such a way that I put a natural language question rather than just keywords asking, okay, how to do this in OpenSearch. I can put this as a natural question pointing to the document index, and we have the neural search plugin already. It brings the answers. So that would be nice addition, so that anyone who is not even technical can search over the documents with their natural questions, how they do in Google.
Okay, so to that point, there's a really awesome project called Haystack by DeepSet AI. I've wanted for so long us to integrate with them, because what they do is they do actually extractive question answering. They use OpenSearch as a data store, or they can. They have a couple different data stores they support, some like vector search engines and stuff like that. But it could actually take from the documentation, extract it into a like real example / natural language example that you could use, similar to other, chat GPT type things. It's a little more simple, but it's really powerful. Anyhow, going to digress. That's awesome. Gonna go link this in that person's question. Be like, hey, look, it is there, and we're gonna continue working on it, because I like that. I think everyone else will as well.
Whew. Can everyone hear me? I thought I lost internet there for a second.
Nope, you're all set.
Awesome. Okay, everyone. Take
Did we lose Nate?
Yeah, we totally did.
All right. Well, with that, everyone, I'm just going to finish this sentence. Take care, and we will catch you at the next community meeting, or reach out in between if you have questions. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.